In 2003, researchers were examining a bacterium, or so they thought, under a microscope before realizing that none of their methods for checking its origin were working on it. They sensed it was something very large and something else entirely, which was a scary thought. Where did this strange sample in 2003 even come from? Back in 1992, an epidemic of Legionnaire's disease hit the English city of Bradford. This disease was supposed to be caused by a bacteria which lived in warm water and usually multiplied at the expense of amoebas. To identify the origin of the Bradford epidemic, microbiologist Timothy Rowbotham took a few samples for research. Well, he did not find what he was looking for. Instead, he found a strange bacteria inside the amoeba sample. In fact, it did not look like a bacteria at all. He tried to characterize it with tools adapted to study bacteria, but to no avail. The sample was returned to a freezer, and then in 1995, the young researcher Richard Birtles took some of it with him. At first, the French researcher did no better than the English. It was impossible to characterize the genome of this strange bacterium until someone had the idea of observing this so-called bacterium with an electron microscope, which could magnify more. Shockingly, they realized that it was in fact not a bacteria, but a virus, and of an astonishing size. It was named Mimivirus, literally microbe-mimicking. Giant viruses are strange and unique in their own right. They have a lot of odd properties. They are more alive compared to the regular viruses, and most of them infect amoeba. After Mimivirus was identified as a virus back in 2003, there have been more giant virus discoveries. And one of the oddest, the 30,000-year-old ancient giant virus, which does signify unknown dangers for mankind. Claverie and Abigail's team learned that scientists in Russia resurrected an ancient plant from fruits buried in 30,000-year-old Siberian permafrost. If it is possible to revive a plant, maybe it is possible to revive a virus, said Claverie. Using permafrost samples provided by the Russian team, they fished for giant viruses using amoeba as bait. The amoeba started dying, and as expected, the team found giant virus particles inside them. An ancient giant virus. Most regular viruses take over the cell's nucleus, but Pithovirus has a different way of multiplying. It copies itself by building replication factories in its host cytoplasm, rather than by taking over the nucleus like other regular viruses. Only 1/3 of its proteins bear any similarity to those of other viruses. The scary part is not this, of course, but the fact it could still infect, even after 30,000 years in permafrost, which means as the climate keeps changing and the ice keeps melting, more unknown viruses from ancient times like the Pithovirus will spread. What if there was a virus that infected ancient humans? Or at first it might infect the amoebas, but what if there's a virus which has a destructive nature and it evolves to infect humans? It might still be trapped inside the ice, still ready to wreak havoc. We have no clue about what devastation it would bring. Although the recent epidemic wasn't a giant virus is no less dangerous, because we did find giant viruses that could infect humans. Although giant viruses almost always target amoeba, Christelle Desnews, a virologist at the French National Center for Scientific Research in Marseille, discovered signs that another giant virus, Mimivirus, had infected 11-month-old baby boy. He had been hospitalized with inflamed lymph nodes, and Desnews' team discovered traces of Mimivirus DNA in his blood, and the virus itself was in the node. So we aren't completely safe from these guys. And being large does allow them to use more tricks because they have more genes. Regular viruses have around 10 genes. For example, the influenza A virus contains 7 genes, and HIV contains only 9 genes, while the ancient giant virus, Pithovirus, has around 467 genes. The first giant virus we discovered, Mimivirus, has around 1018 genes, and Pandora viruses, discovered in 2013, has a large genome made up of 2556 genes. The crazier part is that when the scientists isolated a few Pithoviruses from different samples, only around 50% of the genes matched, which means they evolved fast, and only 7% of genes were known to us. Yes, our database did not contain 93% of those genes. We do not know what those genes are related to. So scientists seem to believe Pithoviruses can invent a lot of new genes, because there wasn't much plausible explanation to the huge amount of orphan genes. Orphan genes are a hard problem in general, because we can't find other genes similar to them in other species. This means we can't build family trees for them. We don't know what it gradually evolved from. And orphan genes, they seem to appear out of nowhere. Now these huge giant viruses, what exactly do they do with all these extra genes? Giant viruses do lack many of the hallmarks of a cellular organism, such as a bacteria. That's why they are still viruses. They do not make their own proteins, produce energy via ATP, or reproduce by dividing. But for instance, CoV has genes for protein translation, transcription, DNA repair, and various metabolic functions, resembling cellular organisms. This complexity raises questions about the traditional definition of viruses, but we don't know a lot about viruses in general, and we can see that in the depths of pig feces. Japanese scientists found a virus that defies conventional wisdom. This virus, unlike any other, lacks the essential structural proteins to form viral particles, meaning it should be incapable of infection or spreading. Named EVG type 2, it presents a paradox, because how does it exist if it cannot replicate on its own? A theory suggests it may parasitize other viruses, borrowing its structural proteins to spread. This discovery hints at a hidden world of viral evolution, unlike anything known before. Viruses aren't all bad, of course. We do know that viruses can infect other things harmful to humans and help save a life. Like a giant virus can kill a human brain-eating parasite, but sometimes smaller viruses can infect giant viruses too. Viruses may cause disease, but some may get infected themselves. This virus of viruses was discovered by La Scola and Cristela Desnuis, who playfully named such a strange virus as Sputnik after the Russian for fellow traveler. It was so unique that they had to classify it into an entirely new family, the virophages. After Mimivirus was discovered, the search for giant viruses continued. La Scola's team identified another virus related to Mimivirus by amoeba in water, taken from another cooling tower, this time from Paris. The new specimen seemed to eclipse even the original giant in size, and the researchers decided to call it Mimivirus. But Mimivirus was sick. When the team looked at these under an electron microscope, they found tiny viral particles, distinct from Mimivirus itself. La Scola and this news found that Sputnik couldn't multiply within the amoeba by itself. It could only multiply within cells that also had been infected with Mimivirus. But Sputnik is not a friendly partner of Mimivirus. It hijacks Mimivirus's replication machinery. Mimivirus's ability to infect the amoeba fell by 70% with Sputnik around. Sputnik is tiny and sports a genome that is almost 100 times smaller, just 21 genes. In fact, Sputnik is a genetic mishmash of different genes from different sources. 13 of these have no equivalent in any other known virus, while the remainder have similarities to genes from other viruses, bacteria, and even more complex cells. 3 of these are closely related to Mimivirus's genes, suggesting that this tiniest of parasites has been raiding genetic material from its host and from other viruses. Some suggest that Sputnik could also be acting as a genetic mule, shuffling genes between giant viruses. It could also explain why Mimivirus has mysteriously and recently picked up bacterial genes of unknown origin. As if that wasn't weird enough, virophages can be weirder. Scientists discovered first ever vampire virus latched to a neck of mind flare. What happens normally is that when a virus enters a cell, it can either go dormant or start replicating right away. Sometimes a virus enters a cell only to find that its new dwelling is already home to another dormant virus. What follows is a battle for control. But sometimes a virus will enter a cell to find a particularly nasty shock, a viral tenant waiting specifically to prey on the incoming virus. Now Miniflare is weirder, a virus that latches onto the neck of another virus instead of waiting for death. It's similar to a horror movie, like a Dracula. This satellite evolved a short appendage that allows it to latch onto its helper's neck like a vampire. It has the potential to open up new avenues for antiviral therapy if destructive viruses can be eliminated this way. The researchers are now trying to determine the giant virus's origins by characterizing the unknown genes and the proteins they encode. The ancestors of Pandora viruses must have been very different from the current three domains of bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes that we have today. Scientists believe that the dynasty on Earth was much bigger than just three domains. The domain archaea contains organisms that included early prokaryotes that live in extreme environments called archaebacteria. The domain bacteria contain typical prokaryotes that lack membrane-bound cell organelles. The domain eukarya contains eukaryotic organisms. It includes the kingdoms Protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Some cells gave rise to modern life, and others survived by parasitizing them and evolving into viruses. So viruses just might be the fourth dimension that had evolved around us without alerting us for a long time. If the technologies like electron microscope weren't around, maybe we would never have seen viruses, or even be able to study them. Hopefully, we'll be able to learn more about viruses in time to be able to fight against them in the future. Thanks for watching and do subscribe for more.
You can purchase our courses related to the above topic with more such assignments and training modules. They are available on our Ko-Fi shop and website. You can also be a part of our initiative by joining a community. Please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more this week.